Thanks for tuning in. We visit with the legislative sponsor of Michigan's Internet Casino and Sports Gaming. He's former state representative Brandt Iden, now a VP in charge of Government Affairs for a big-time betting platform. Our lead story, banning cell phones in schools, will it fly? Around the OTR table, Simon Schuster, Cheyna Roth, and Colin Jackson. Sit in with us as we get the inside out, off the record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubick.
Thank you very much. Welcome back to Off the Record. An interesting week this week. Lots of stuff going on. And look, we turned around and we've got another person running for the U.S. Senate. This person is whom?
We now have Haley Stevens, who is currently a congresswoman, and she joins, who do we got now? We got just like a mass of names. We got Abdul El-Sayed, we've got Mallory McMorrow, who's a current state senator. Is that it? I feel like there's more.
On the Democratic side.
It for now.
And the Dems. Who we got on the Republicans?
On the Republican side, we have Mike Rogers is running. There's a few other people that are putting the name out there. I think Brian Kelly might be someone who could potentially be entering the race. Tudor Dixon, someone who could be potentially entering the race.
But what does Stevens bring to the table?
I think she brings a decent amount of energy, a decent amount of experience. I think when you look at the current batch of Democrats, you've got Mallory McMorrow, who tends to be sort of like the middle ground person. And then you've got Abdul El-Sayed, who is the more progressive left. He's a Bernie Sanders acolyte. And then I think Haley Stevens is for the more like right of center folks. You know, she tends to be a bit more on the conservative end of the Democratic policy. She's a big, I believe she's a big auto person.
Worked with Obama to save the auto industry, if you believe her commercial.
Exactly. So I think that's sort of like where the lineup is right now, which if it stays this way, you got your choice of rare, medium, and well done.
Yeah, I think that there's still a significant amount of reverence for the campaigns that Alyssa Slotkin was able to run. And when you look at the way she structured her campaigns, her playbook and strategies, someone who is very focused on sort of a down-the-middle approach, talking about economic and kitchen table issues. And Haley Stevens, of the candidates that we've seen so far, is probably best suited to sort of occupy that lane. But of course, right now we're still in a period where Democrats are trying to reshape their identity, try to maybe figure out a new playbook moving forward in the second Trump administration. And so whether or not they're going to sort of cling to what works, what they've seen work, at least very closely in the last election, or they want to try out for something new, is going to be up to primary voters.
Yeah, and I think there's similar. Haley Stevens was one of the candidates or one of the congresspeople who was campaigning very heavily for Kamala Harris last year. She was in a lot of these rooms when a lot of other Democrats were pushing the vice president to be more to the left or on certain issues. Haley Stevens was right there to defend her and listen, but also, again, push Democrats to continue supporting the party and the strategy that they've been doing. So I think to Shayna's point, you have your rare, you have your medium, and you have your well-done options on the political spectrum here.
Let's make this a thing. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, you look she's a fighter, okay? Yes. She took on the Levin family.
Yeah, and
think
won.
about it,
and
won.
That was not an easy race.
Okay, they gave Mr. Levin a way out to run on another district. He decided to take her on, and he took him to the cleaners, which is something. Are there more, or is the number 3?
Well, I think we're all kind of waiting to see if Dana Nessel joins the race.
Has she made any noises at all about this, other than us putting it in print that she's thinking about it? Has she actually said that to anybody?
I haven't seen it. I haven't talked to her directly about it at all.
This may be out of whole cloth.
Yeah, she's not certainly someone who's, intentionally put her name out there, someone who's trying to sort of stir the pot so that her name continues to be in the mix. It's not been a self-perpetuating speculation.
I'm not sure if she's writing a book. I'll put it that way.
Is that a prerequisite now to run for office? You got to write a book.
Maybe. I think it certainly helps because then you can get out, you can get on the podcast, you can get on the radio, you can get on the different shows. You can get out there and you say, well, it's my book tour. I'm just promoting this book. Yeah. It doesn't have anything to do with my political whatevers. I'm just trying to spread the message of all these things that I have learned. And you can go under the guise of author. Yeah. So I think it's a good strategy.
It's good both for the campaign finance reasons, but also because our politics right now is so nationalized. When you read these are books that are not written just for Michiganders or Democratic primary voters in the state of Michigan. These are books that are written for a national audience. And the reason why is because Democrats increasingly are dependent on national fundraising sources. They want to bring in major donors, both from out of state, like the big fish who are going to give them $10,000 checks at fundraisers, but also the folks who are going to give $1 or $2 dozens of times throughout the campaign cycle. And books help get their name in the mix, get them on those media appearances, as Cheyna was saying, and help bring in those dollars.
Well, speaking of books, let's talk about cell phones and getting kids in classrooms to look at books. Check it out. It's a pretty good bet that if lawmakers impose a total ban on cell phone usage for kindergarten kids, well, there probably will be no hue and cry. The higher you go up the education ladder, the hewing and the crying from some parents and students will be audible. Plus, there's a legislative dispute on how to do all of this if they're going to restrict cell phone usage. For example, in the Senate Education Committee this week, during testimony, the chairwoman said she favors restrictions, but wants schools to make most of the final decisions on what those are. But over in the House, the sponsor wants 800 school districts to abide by some mandated baseline requirements from the state, with the flexibility to go beyond that locally. And Representative Mark Tisdale warns,
if we wait for all 886 to come up with a program, we're going to be waiting a long time. We're just trying to establish a baseline for the school districts to operate off of.
One proposal would ban cell phones during classroom time, where teachers are more than eager to end their competition with social media devices in their students' hands. Another proposal would allow schools to ban them during lunch, during recess, and during the walks between classes. One plan would also relax the restrictions during an emergency and for medical reasons, or if the cells are actually part of a student's education. Governor Whitmer, for her part, wants a bipartisan solution. But with the Senate headed in one direction and the House in another, for Michigan to join 9 other states with restrictions on cells, well, they'd have to find a compromise. And they're not there yet. So the question is, will they get there?
I think it's very possible for them to get there, but I mean, pedagogy is something that moves not at the pace of a legislative session, but over years and generations. And so the question of local control, I think, is a pertinent one. And, you know, it's easier to change an individual school district's approach for administrators to change that than it is for legislators to change statute generally, especially in terms of political will.
And I think this is one of those things where if we just let schools take control on this, they will probably, even without any sort of laws or bills or anything like that, they probably would have figured this out on their own at some point.
Some already have.
And exactly, a lot of them already have. And I think that it's very tricky because you are trying to figure out, you have parents who in some cases want their kids to have school. I mean, we live in a time where school shootings are very real and kids want to be able to have those phones. Their parents want them to be able to get a hold of them if an emergency does, God forbid, happen. So it's a very delicate line to go.
Mr. Tisdale says that's exactly the wrong thing to do because you don't want your kids on the phone, not listening to the person in the front of the room to try to get them through this thing. And he said you don't want all the parents showing up at this site if there's shooting going on. And he said, so basically, he hears that argument, but he's rejecting it.
Yeah, and I get what he's saying, but also, like, I mean, that hasn't happened necessarily. Like, I mean,
we don't know.
We don't know, but then we're just trying to legislate all of these different hypotheticals.
Well, I think something, too, is just in terms of getting something to the finish line, I think you have one of the most valuable things, which is a common goal between both sides, and that's stopping cell phones in schools. Now, I think to Cheyna's point, I think that schools themselves will probably come up with their own policies at some point or another. I remember when I was in high school, maybe Simon can relate to this, too, maybe Cheyna can.
I cannot, I'm too old.
But when I was in high school, if you had your phone out in class, you got a detention. Sometimes you had the cool teacher that will let you use your phone as a calculator or something. But even within that policy, you still saw kids to the side looking at their phone during class. And in college, it's the same way. And so even if you do have these new laws that require schools to institute these policies, who's to say it'll make that much of a difference? We may just be going back in time to 2010, 2013, 2011, 2013.
But let me just argue on the other side. You might have some local school boards, name a location, which are very sensitive to getting reelected. And if the parents are breathing down your back and the kids are angry at you, well, maybe we'll we're not sure we'll do anything. Let's form a study committee.
Yeah, I mean, that's the classic punt that any public body would ever use on an issue they don't want to tackle, right? But, I mean, I think that this is something that, regardless of whether or not it's a mandate that schools have to restrict cell phones. Students have been in an arms race with teachers and administrators for years on getting access to technology when they're trying to be barred from it in the classroom. And that's not going to stop regardless of whichever way this is legislated.
Kids are always going to be doing one of these and trying to use their phones when they shouldn't be.
You're dealing with the iPad kid generation. Yep. Like, this is natural for them.
They're attached to these phones, aren't they?
Yeah.
A little bit.
I mean, I was attached to my phone, but now it's even only got more integral and more works. Worser.
Nicely put. I didn't tell you about this earlier, but Donald Trump's coming in next week to celebrate 100 days. Does he bring money with him for Selfridge or for space?
I'm sure that's something that both Governor Whitmer and House Speaker Matt Hall would appreciate very much.
Does he do it?
I think that it's very likely, and I think that it represents a huge...
very likely?
I think it's fairly likely.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think in part because Donald Trump needs a win right now amid all of the negative news around the economy and
tariff thing with him.
He may.
A twofer.
Yeah, and it's funny that he has something of a semi-ally here in Sean Fain, because this is something that, speaks to the automotive industry and especially people on the assembly line who are looking to reshore this manufacturing. But the thing that's going to be, I think, would bring some consternation for the governor is that there's been a long list of local and federal officials who have been pushing for more military resources at Selfridge. And this represents an opportunity for Trump to make the announcement himself and capture a lot of the credit on his own through a hometown audience. And so I'd be a little bit nervous that if there's going to be a big unveiling right now where I'm not going to get to be present as an elected official, that, he's going to steal a lot of that spotlight.
What do you think?
I think what Simon's saying makes sense, and I think that probably that would be the move for Donald Trump, is to bring the money, make himself a hometown hero, and here in Michigan, really shore up some of that goodwill. Whether or not he actually does that, I mean, I'm not going to try and get in his mind and try and predict that.
Well, sometimes I think the hype enough is enough to really advance the storyline, too. So I think whether or not he does it, there's still the idea that, okay, you have President Trump coming to Macomb County, home of Selfridge Air National Air Base, and you also have this following the heels of that meeting at the White House with Governor Whitmer, Speaker Hall. When he talked about this a little bit, he said, we're going to take care of you. Speaker Hall seems confident that Trump is going to take care of Michigan and keep his word. So
I think importantly also that we underestimate the extent to which Trump relies on the rally as an event to sort of read the room and gauge the temperature of his supporters and his base. And I think Macomb County is a really important test bed for him to try to suss out, 100 days into this administration, how people are reacting to this economy. The level of hype and enthusiasm that he's going to feel in this crowd, I think he's going to read into that.
If I was going to guess, I would guess he'd bring the money, and give it the check. Now, the question is, does the governor show up at the airport to welcome him, since they're now the best buds and drinking buddies? Not really. Yeah. What do you think? You don't have to go to the event. But the protocol, isn't the protocol that the governor greets presidents regardless?
I mean, it would be a great opportunity to at least relitigate, but to make up for the folder in the face appearance at the White House. You can choose how you appear in this situation.
I thought we could get through one show without having that come up. Darn. Okay, sorry about that. All right, let's call in our guest today, a former state representative from the Kalamazoo era, former Republican, and now a vice president for what's the name of your company?
Fanatics Betting and Gaming. Great to be back with you, Tim.
It's good to see you and nice to have you on board. So let's cut to the chase. In a weak moment last night, I had original thought. How fearful is your industry about AI coming in and taking all the fun out of betting? Are you guys worried about that at all?
Well, that's a fair question. And I will tell you that AI has come a long way. It's not to the point where it's determining bets or anything. You can't go to AI and say, hey, who's going to win the outcome of this game? It may give you some statistics, but at the end of the day, it's the same statistics and data that all of our companies are dealing with. So I'm not sure that we're necessarily worried about it, although it's rapidly advancing just like every other bit of technology these days.
Well, if it got to the point where it increases the odds of the people using AI to win and reduce your odds or increase your odds to lose, now you're concerned.
Yeah, for sure. Well, always, right? I mean, in that particular case, but I will say that AI isn't really there. You could go to ChatGPT right now and put in who's going to win, March Madness, and basically it's going to spit out a lot of the seeds. There may be one or two upsets that come into play, but you're not going to see a lot of that with AI these days. It doesn't get to the point where it's absolutely predicting the outcomes of the games.
Cheyna.
I'm curious. So your big push when you were a state lawmaker was to legalize sports betting and to promote sports betting in Michigan. And now you work for a sports betting company. Is coincidence?
Well, I figured you may ask that question. Look, here's the reality. Here's the reality of it. I was given some great advice when I first came into the legislature, which is become an expert in one thing because you have such finite time there. Now, remember, I served in the legislature a long time ago when we had term limits. A lot of things have changed since then. And I will tell you that I'm not sure that the person that gave me that advice meant get involved in casino gaming necessarily, but I became a casino and gaming. I became an expert in casino gaming and sports betting. And look, since then, which has been a very long time now, I've continued to expand and become an expert in the industry even more. And I will say that the Michigan model is one that is looked at across the country as being one of the most successful in the country. And so I get folks, lawmakers, lobbyists, others, casino operators that come to me and say, why is Michigan so successful? And what have we done? What have you done? And what have others done in the state to make sure that it continues to be successful? I mean, you're looking at over $2.1 billion that have come into the state since 2019. That's a massive amount of money. And remember, 65% of that goes to education. At the end of the day, this is, we're looking at almost $50 million a month that are coming in, $30+ million that's going to education. This is a massive amount of money that's come in. So it's become a very successful model. And people across the country always ask me, Michigan's great. How did you do it? How can we replicate the same thing?
But on the flip side of that, when you look at the proliferation of sports betting and the gaming industry in Michigan, there is also an increase that comes with that in gambling addiction, right? How do you sort of balance that public health issue against some of this extra revenue that the state may be taking in?
Well, no, that's a fantastic question. And I will tell you this, that what we're seeing nationally is about what stacks up in Michigan, which are 2 to 3% of players have some sort of addiction. And that varies at different levels. But of course, that's the addiction amounts that we see. And the money that I talked about, the 65% of the revenue that comes in, that gets portioned off to the iGaming fund, which does go to fund not only education, but treatment, addiction, treatment services, as well as there's money there that goes towards cancer, the cancer presumption fund for firefighters. I mean, look, Michigan is investing and continues to invest. Henry Williams has done a fantastic job, our chair of the Michigan Gaming Control Board, of making sure that he continues to pour more money into addiction treatment services. But the answer is very simple, which is, look, at the end of the day, more can always be done. And more should be done. One of the things that I've seen in other states that and I just had more time in Michigan to work on this issue that I think is very interesting, is they've got a gaming treatment court. And that's a specialty court for people that have committed a crime because it had something to do with a gaming addiction. Maybe they, committed a financial crime or something. And this gaming addiction court gets people back on the right track. It's kind of like a drug treatment court. Something like that is great. And I think states should continue to, explore new options.
But isn't the best way to make sure that people don't have this gambling addiction or, prevent going so far with their gambling addiction is to not make gambling so accessible? I mean, you can do it from your couch now.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. But here's the reality of it. You're going to be able to do it anyway. In these states that don't have online casino, there are just a plethora of options that exist. You can you open your phone, go to Google, type in blackjack, poker. In any state that doesn't authorize online casino today, you're able to play. And so the reality of it is that why not have the protections in place, the treatment services in place, the money coming into the state to be able to help people is really the reality of it. If you just have these, offshore actors that operate in the marketplace without any restrictions, you're just going to have people that are unfortunately going to get sucked into this system and this cycle without any help. And that's really what having the regulation and laws in place really at the end of the day. Sometimes I know it can seem counterintuitive, but that at the end of the day actually helps people.
We're in a moment when a lot of states are wondering about the certainty of their federal funding. Online gaming and sports betting is a way for some states to really supplement some of that revenue. How much of that is part of your push when you go to other states and try to convince them to open up their casino laws?
Yeah, that's a big conversation that's happening across the country right now. These states are scared. especially states that take in a lot of federal funding, states like Louisiana, Vermont. I have these conversations in these states. They bring in a tremendous amount of federal revenue, and they are scared. And the reality of it is that this is an opportunity for them to supplement new revenue into their states without having to go back to their citizens and ask them for more money. This is a new avenue. And so it's a conversation that's out there. It's a conversation that I'm having regularly. And look, I mean, it's a tougher issue for all the reasons that we sort of talked about from a political perspective. If you remember in Michigan, this took me probably 5 or 6 years of my 6-year career to pass. This isn't something that happens overnight, but with the education, it can get done, and it can be a huge boon for states.
Right now, we're also in this climate where it seems like sports betting is almost omnipresent. It doesn't matter what state you go to, whatever game you watch. Even if you're not in a state that has sports betting, it seems like you're still seeing BetMGM or Caesars Palace betting app ads. What are the biggest obstacles right now to expanding sports betting, and how close are we to seeing something maybe nationally or versus this patchwork of state-by-state legalization?
Well, that's very interesting. So right now, you're right. You've got 39 states plus the District of Columbia, which have authorized some version of sports betting, be it online, retail, where you go in person, place a wager, something like that. So look, we're getting close in terms of all the states. Now, some of the big ones out there, California, Texas, still have yet to legalize. And it may be a while because in all of these states that are left, there are some very tricky political nuances as to why it hasn't gotten done yet. You've got 109 tribes in the state of California, for example. As you can imagine, there's 109 differences of opinion as to how to get sports betting done in that particular state. But look, I mean, I think it's coming from a federal perspective. That's something that we, as an industry, we have always said doesn't make a lot of sense for the industry. And the reality of it is state gaming has always been a states' rights issue. And when PASPA was overturned 6 years ago to allow states to determine whether or not they wanted to do sports betting, that court decision was based on states' rights. And so for the federal government to step in now, I think would create even more chaos, even though you do have a patchwork and separate framework. You have a patchwork and separate framework for all gaming. Some states allow gaming, some states don't.
Representative, while the states may be looking at this, the effect on the economy, doesn't that have an impact on the consumer? Are there some people who say, you know what, with all that uncertainty in Washington, maybe I shouldn't be placing a bet? Have you picked up on that as well?
Well, first off, I haven't been called representative in a very long time, Tim, so I think I was thrown off by the question. But anyway, that being the case, look, yes, there's uncertainty out there right now. There's uncertainty in the marketplace just in general. I think that there's concern as I talk to folks, the tariff issues, the stock market. People are concerned. I saw some numbers just last week that showed that Vegas, in terms of tourism, has been down the past 3 weeks. I think that is just an indicator of the economy where people are a bit nervous right now. They're a bit unsure about kind of what's going to happen next. But, I think like everything, it's an entertainment product, and folks set aside dollars for entertainment, whether it's to travel and get on a plane and go to Vegas and enjoy, whether it's to stay in your hometown, go to the city of Detroit, for example, and participate. People have always got entertainment dollars available, hopefully, for entertainment experiences.
If I could ask briefly, when you were serving in the state legislature, you were one of the closest friends and associates of the former House Speaker, Lee Chatfield, and he's currently under criminal indictment for a host of legal charges related to his use of dark money funds. I know that you traveled on some of these trips with the former House Speaker. Can you talk to me about your experience on those trips and what you think about the charges he's facing?
Well, I can talk to you about gaming at the end of the day, and I will tell you that it's been a long time since I served. You're right. I was very close with Lee. It's difficult to see what he and his family have gone through, and I wish him all the best with that. The reality is, at the end of the day, I probably learned a lot about gaming, and I continue to learn a lot about gaming in my experiences now post my legislative career.
So, do you think he's getting a bum rap?
It's tough. I've seen all I know is sort of what's public out there. In fact, I don't even have a Detroit News subscription anymore. So what's behind a paywall, I can't even see. And it's tough. I'm sure it's tough on his family. It's been a long time. And I'd be tough on anybody, I imagine, Tim.
Was there ever a point in your forced march to get this legalized in Michigan where you thought this is going down the tubes? It's just not going to happen?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was I very vividly remember when Governor Snyder vetoed this legislation on his way out the door in 2018 after I had worked so hard with the Senate and the House to get it done. And then Governor Whitmer came in and she saved the day with me at the end of the day on this. It was trying times. I thought I was going to throw in the towel a couple times on this. As I say, it feels like my 6-year career. I worked on it the entirety of my 6 years. And it's been great for Michigan. The reality of it is that it continues to deliver. It continues to deliver for students, the city of Detroit, and I'm very proud of what we created there.
Is Michigan ahead of the pack of all the other states on how they're doing this?
Michigan is number 2 in the country behind New Jersey. And in fact, I learned just today, I was looking this morning at some numbers out of the American Gaming Association. Detroit actually ranks 8th in the country as it stacks up against other states and cities which have gaming. And so, look, Michigan is always been a big gaming state. Hopefully will continue to be a big gaming state. It's great for the economy. It's great for the citizens. And it's been great for the state.
So I assume you're not coming back to Michigan to run for office again.
No, I heard you all talking about all the different candidates earlier. That I'm not doing. I'm living in Florida now, and I absolutely love it.
All right. Do you miss us?
Well, of course, I always miss you, Tim. You know, our relationship goes back about a decade now. I can't believe that, but somehow I got old.
Good, and I didn't. All right, thank you, Representative. It's good to see you down in Tampa, Florida. Have a safe weekend. Nice talking to you. Also, thanks to our great panel. More Off the Record right here next week. Please come back.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by Bellwether Public Relations, a full-service strategic communications agency partnering with clients through public relations, digital marketing, and issue advocacy. Learn more at bellwetherpr.com. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan Public Television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record.